I have clamps all over my shop in lots of various different places. Now that I have a larger shop, I figured it was time that I make some sort of solution where I could get all of my clamping stuff, clamps, glue, everything that goes along with a glue up all in one location. So my plan was to build one of those mobile clamp carts that I'm sure most of you have seen all over the internet. And the number one goal for me was to try to mostly utilize one sheet of plywood to get most of the components out of, which I ended up doing at the table saw, ripping them down into different widths for all the different components that I would need, before then taking them over to the miter saw and cutting them all to the angle that I would need. To keep the project simple, I'm just using pocket screw construction for holding everything together. I figured that would make things fast and easy, and it's just a shop project, so I'm not really too concerned with how it all looks. Once I had both A-frames fully constructed and screwed together, I could then cut out the components for each one of the trays that would go in the middle in between them, and I'm just ripping those out of the same plywood material that I used in the beginning to cut the A-frames out of. I laid out all the strips onto my outfeed table so that I could mark out each one of the parts to try and get the best yield that I could possibly get according to my cut list. Once I had all my measurements laid out, I used my miter gauge to cut all of the parts to their final length. For the bottom of each tray, I just ended up using some leftover, or not leftover, but scrap 3/8 plywood that I've been kicking around the shop for a few years now. This stuff actually was part of the shipping crate for my planer that I bought. I glued and clamped each one of the slightly oversized bottoms onto each one of the trays. Once the glue had dried, I took it over to the router table and cleaned up the little bit of overhang that was hanging off around each one of the drawer bottoms with a flush trim bit. I could then go back and add some staples around the perimeter just for added insurance. I did a quick sand to each one of the components to make sure that I could flush up all of the uneven surfaces before getting to the point where I could actually glue the trays to the A-frames themselves. So to try and make attaching the trays to the A-frames as painless as possible, my plan was to make center points of each one of the trays corresponding to where they line up on the A-frames, clamp those in place dry, pre-drill and countersink for screws, take that back apart, apply the glues so I wouldn't have to worry about the parts sliding around, stick them back onto the A-frames and attach the screws. This to me seemed to be the easiest way going in, and once I had done it, it definitely was fairly simple to do. And like I said, it kept from the glue making it just a sliding mess as I was trying to attach each one of the trays. The screws kept any of that from happening and basically made the glue up really simple. Hopefully that all makes sense. I glued the top and bottom tray first, letting them fully set up, and then added the middle tray last, again just to keep things as simple and less chaotic as possible. I added these plywood glue blocks off camera to the bottom of the bottom trays just to give something for the screws to bite into whenever I added the casters. For the rails that the actual clamps would hang off of, I decided that it'd be a good time to use up this big pile of scrap 2x4s that I had lying around the shop. And I started by first cutting one rough end off with my miter gauge, and then flipping it around and cutting each one of them to length, before then ripping strips out of each edge of them over at the table saw. This kind of killed two birds with one stone. A, it used up this old material that I didn't really have any other use for, and secondly, because the 2x4 edges already have roundovers on them, I didn't have to add that later. To attach them to the A-frames, I just pre-drilled and attached each one of them with a single screw on each end. I cut 12 of these slats total, but I only ended up using 8 of them. I had 2 at the top, 2 at the middle, 2 at the bottom, and then 1 in the middle of each of those areas. And I made sure to space the 2 at the top, middle, and bottom no farther apart than my shortest 6-inch clamp. That way, once they're hanging from one of the rungs, they don't just swing freely. There's something on the bottom to support it to prevent it from possibly falling off. Once I had the clamp cart built, I could then go through the fun part of gathering up all the clamps that I had around the shop and start to hang them from the cart and pretty much, stand back and see what it's going to look like. So I decided to add a little bit of organization into the center tray of the clamp cart, and I started by adding a cleat on the inside of the tray on the front and back, given enough spacing to fit these little plastic trays that my wife had bought to go in there. And once I did that, I could cut a 1/4-inch piece of MDF to fit perfectly down in there that I could then use the Inventables X-Carve to cut out an organizer to hold all of the various glues and biscuits and spreaders and stuff like that. Basically anything that pertained to gluing, I could have it all organized in one spot neatly and know where everything is at every time I get ready to glue something up. Once that part was finished, I could then load the top and bottom trays with different random clamps and things that I would basically had no other good space for. And at that point, the clamp cart is pretty much complete. I'm really pleased with how the clamp cart came out. I can't wait to use this thing on future projects and to have it keep everything sort of neat and tidy in the shop as far as clamps and glue up goes. If you're interested in building one of these for yourself, we have project plans available. You can click the link to our website down in the description below. We'll take you to that. But also, I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Inventables and the Carve for sponsoring this project. That's pretty much all I've got for you guys this time. So until then, happy trails. Thanks for watching.